War has always been a messy, loud, and human affair. It requires soldiers to pull triggers, generals to give orders, and a population willing to sacrifice its children. But we are standing on the precipice of a new era where the decision to take a life is outsourced to a circuit board. Imagine a bullet that does not just fly in a straight line, but stops, hovers, waits, and identifies you by the geometry of your face. This is not science fiction. The technology exists today. We call them Slaughterbots, and they mark the moment when humanity lost the monopoly on violence. So, let us analyze why the wars of the future will not be fought by brave men, but by swarms of cheap plastic that simply clean up the biomass. To understand the gravity of this shift, we must first recognize that for the entirety of human history, the capacity for mass destruction was gated by economic scarcity. If a nation wanted to project power or level a city, it required the mobilization of a massive industrial base, the conscription of thousands of citizens, and the expenditure of a significant percentage of its gross domestic product. The tools of the trade, aircraft carriers, intercontinental ballistic missiles, main battle tanks, and stealth bombers, are marvels of engineering, but they are also exceptionally heavy, slow to manufacture, and ruinously expensive to maintain. A single modern fighter jet costs roughly $80 million, requires a pilot who has undergone years of specialized training, and relies on a supply chain that stretches across the globe. This high barrier to entry acted as a stabilizing mechanism. Only the wealthiest and most organized superpowers could afford to threaten the world with annihilation, creating a geopolitical equilibrium based on the sheer difficulty of waging war. However, we are currently witnessing the collapse of this economic barrier, driven by the relentless miniaturization of consumer electronics and the commoditization of advanced robotics. The same market forces that put a supercomputer in your pocket and a quadcopter in your nephew's toy chest have inadvertently democratized the ability to kill on a massive scale. We are moving away from the era of heavy metal, where tonnage and armor plating define superiority, and entering the era of the algorithm, where victory goes to the side with the most efficient processors and the cheapest airframes. A lethal autonomous drone does not cost $80 million. It costs less than a smartphone, can be 3D printed in a garage, and requires components that are available on the open market without restriction. The lethality that was once the exclusive domain of state actors is now accessible to anyone with a few $1,000s and a basic understanding of code, effectively erasing the distinction between a superpower and a startup. The anatomy of this new soldier is terrifying precisely because of its banality and its diminutive stature. We are not talking about the Predator drones of the early 2000s, which were essentially pilotless airplanes firing Hellfire missiles. We are talking about quadcopters small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. These devices are stripped of all non-essential weight, carrying only a camera, a flight controller, a battery, and a payload that changes the calculus of infantry combat forever. This payload is typically a shaped explosive charge weighing no more than 3 grams, an amount of explosive that seems negligible until you understand the physics of how it is applied. Upon detonation, a shaped charge focuses all its energy into a hypersonic jet of molten metal capable of punching through steel, Kevlar, and certainly the human skull. It does not need to blow up a building. It only needs to penetrate the cranium of the target, turning a $20 toy into a guaranteed lethal event that no helmet can withstand. The true horror of this technology reveals itself when we stop thinking about individual assassinations and start thinking about industrial scalability. In the old model of warfare, increasing your killing power meant recruiting more humans, which introduced logistical nightmares regarding food, morale, disease, and political dissent. In a new model, increasing your killing power is simply a matter of manufacturing volume, a problem that factories solved a century ago. Because these drones are small and require no life support systems, they can be packed with a density that defies traditional military logic. A standard 40-foot shipping container the kind you see stacked on cargo vessels by the thousands, can hold approximately 1 million of these lethal micro-drones. A single cargo ship, indistinguishable from the thousands of others traversing the oceans daily, could theoretically carry enough autonomous weapons to wipe out the armed forces of a medium-sized nation without ever landing a single human boot on the ground. This creates a strategic capability that military theorists call scalable surgical strike, but a more accurate term might be selective genocide. Traditional weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear or chemical warheads, are blunt instruments that destroy infrastructure, poison the land, and leave the conquered territory uninhabitable for decades. They are messy and politically costly, as they destroy the very assets the conqueror hopes to seize. A swarm of Slaughterbots offers a chilling alternative: the ability to eliminate the population while leaving the buildings, the bridges, the power grids, and the data centers completely untouched. A swarm could be programmed to target only combatants carrying weapons, or only men of military age, or, in a darker scenario, specific ethnic groups or political adversaries identified by facial recognition data scraped from social media. The city of tomorrow could be conquered in an afternoon, its streets silent and its cafes empty, with the Wi-Fi still running and the lights still on, waiting for the new occupants to simply walk in and take the keys. The shift from human soldiers to autonomous swarms also fundamentally alters the concept of attrition and the political cost of conflict. When a human soldier dies, it is a tragedy that reverberates through families and communities, creating political pressure to end the war. When a drone is shot down, it is merely a loss of hardware, a line item in a budget that can be replaced by the next production run from the factory floor. There is no letter to write to the drone's mother, no flag-draped coffin, and no psychological trauma for the operator who might be thousands of miles away, or, more likely, for the algorithm that felt nothing in the first place. This decoupling of violence from human consequence lowers the threshold for conflict, making war not a last resort, but a low-risk policy option for any entity with the capital to purchase the swarm. We are entering a period where the machinery of death is becoming lighter, faster, and infinitely more abundant, turning the battlefield into a processing plant where the only limiting factor is how fast you can print the plastic. The true danger of this technology lies not in the hardware itself, but in the software that governs its behavior, a concept known in military circles as swarm intelligence. It is a fundamental error to imagine these devices as remote-controlled airplanes, each requiring a human pilot with a joystick to guide it to its target. Instead, these machines operate autonomously, communicating with one another in real time through a peer-to-peer mesh network that mimics the biological behaviors of a flock of starlings or a school of fish. When a swarm is released, there is no central command unit to target, no queen bee whose death would deactivate the rest. The intelligence is distributed across the entire cloud. If one drone detects an obstacle or a threat, that data is instantly shared with every other unit in the formation, allowing the collective to move, adapt, and react as a single, fluid entity. This creates a battlefield dynamic where the enemy is not a collection of individuals, but a liquid mass of computing power that flows around defenses rather than crashing against them. This distributed intelligence grants the swarm a level of psychological resilience that no human battalion can ever hope to emulate. In traditional warfare, a unit that suffers 50% casualties is effectively destroyed. The remaining soldiers are broken by fear, the chain of command is severed, and the instinct for self-preservation overrides the mission objectives. A drone swarm possesses no such biological vulnerabilities. It feels no fear, it suffers no trauma, and it has no concept of self-preservation beyond what is programmed for mission success. If you shoot down half of a swarm, the remaining 50% do not panic or retreat. They simply recalculate the optimal formation based on the new available assets and continue closing the distance. They will pursue their objective with a cold, mathematical relentlessness that is terrifying to behold, continuing to attack until the last battery is drained or the target is eliminated. There is no bargaining with them. There is no suppressing them with shock and awe. And there is no breaking their morale because they do not have any. Furthermore, the biological limitations of the human nervous system render us obsolete in a direct kinetic engagement with these machines. The average human reaction time, the time it takes for your eye to see a threat and your brain to tell your finger to pull a trigger, is approximately 250 milliseconds. To an artificial intelligence running on modern processors, 250 milliseconds is an eternity, a vast stretch of time in which it can run thousands of simulations, adjust its flight path, and execute a lethal maneuver. In a close-quarters environment, such as an urban center or the hallway of a building, the swarm operates at the speed of electricity, while the human defender operates at the speed of chemistry. By the time the human soldier has identified the buzzing sound and turned their head, the algorithm has already calculated the trajectory, adjusted for wind resistance, and detonated the payload. We are entering an era of hyperwar, where the speed of combat exceeds the cognitive threshold of the human brain, ensuring that the biological operator is dead before they even realize the engagement has begun. However, the reason the swarm will win is not solely due to its tactical superiority, but due to a brutal economic reality known as the cost-exchange ratio. Modern military defense is built on a paradigm of high-value assets intercepting other high-value assets. We build multi-million-dollar missile systems to shoot down multi-million-dollar enemy jets. But the introduction of the Slaughterbot creates a catastrophic financial asymmetry that no national treasury can sustain. Consider the Patriot missile system, a pinnacle of air defense engineering that costs approximately $3 million per shot. If an enemy launches a swarm of 1,000 drones, each costing $50, and you attempt to intercept them with Patriot missiles, you're spending $3 billion to destroy $50,000 worth of plastic. You will bankrupt your own military-industrial complex in a matter of days, while the enemy can simply print another batch of drones for the price of a mid-range sedan. The terrifying implication of this math is that traditional defensive measures are rendered useless not because they do not work, but because they are insolvent. Even if you use cheaper bullets or laser systems, the swarm wins through the logic of saturation. They can simply put more targets in the air than you have ammunition in your magazines. A defensive system that is 99% effective is a failure if the enemy sends 10,000 units, because the 100 that get through are sufficient to eliminate the target. The attacker does not need to win every engagement. They only need to overwhelm the system's throughput for a few seconds. This turns warfare into a simple equation of volume versus capacity, and in a contest between mass-manufactured consumer electronics and bespoke military hardware, volume will always win. Skeptics often argue that the solution is electronic warfare, believing that we can simply jam the signals and cause the drones to fall out of the sky like stones. This argument relies on an outdated understanding of how these machines operate, assuming they require a constant connection to a GPS satellite or a human pilot. The lethal drones of the near future utilize edge computing, meaning all the processing power required to fly and hunt is contained directly on the chip inside the drone itself. They do not navigate by GPS. They navigate visually, using cameras and machine learning algorithms to recognize the terrain, just as a human soldier uses their eyes. You cannot jam a camera any more than you can jam a pair of binoculars. If the drone can see the environment, it can navigate it. This renders our sophisticated electronic countermeasures effectively useless, leaving us with a grim conclusion. The tanks, aircraft carriers, and fighter jets that we have spent trillions of dollars building are now the equivalent of knights in heavy armor walking onto a battlefield dominated by machine guns. Expensive, impressive, and hopelessly obsolete. The most disturbing capability of these systems is not their explosive power, but their ability to process information, effectively transforming the drone from a blind grenade into a flying, intelligent camera connected to a global database. We are integrating the lethality of a munition with the tracking precision of social media algorithms, creating a weapon that does not kill based on geography, but based on identity. By utilizing onboard facial recognition software, gait analysis, and biometric profiling, a Slaughterbot can be programmed to hunt a specific individual, a specific uniform, or even a specific ethnic phenotype with absolute discrimination. It does not need to level a city block to kill a terrorist leader. It simply needs to be released in the general area, where it will patrol, scan, and match every face it sees against a kill list stored in its memory. Once a positive match is confirmed to a statistical certainty, the machine executes its terminal maneuver, delivering its payload directly to the target's forehead while leaving the person standing next to them completely unharmed. This precision enables a nightmare scenario that fundamentally changes the experience of warfare for the civilian population, turning the safest sanctuaries into killing fields. Imagine a swarm released not over a battlefield, but into a dense urban center, flowing through the streets like a metallic vapor that ignores walls and fortifications. These devices are small enough to enter through open windows, navigate air conditioning vents, squeeze under doors, and fly down chimneys, turning every home into a potential front line. As they move through the city, they ignore the civilians who are not on the target list, flying past children and non-combatants with a cold indifference that is more terrifying than aggression. They are hunting for the political dissidents, the members of a specific religious group, or the opposing officer corps, and they will not stop until every face in the database has been located and processed. There is no hiding from a weapon that knows what you look like, acts without fatigue, and can search every room in a skyscraper in under an hour. For military strategists and authoritarian regimes, this capability offers a seductive promise that ensures the proliferation of the technology, the promise of hygienic genocide. In the past, wiping out an opposing government or an insurgent population required carpet bombing or artillery barges that destroyed the economic value of the territory being conquered. With lethal autonomous weapons, a conqueror can eliminate the entire defending force or the entire ruling class without breaking a single window or damaging a single piece of infrastructure. The invading army can march into a city that is fully functional, with its power grids, factories, and banks intact, simply stepping over the bodies of the resistance. This removes the collateral cost of war, making mass killing a highly efficient tool for regime change and ethnic cleansing, stripped of the messy destruction that usually turns world opinion against the aggressor. We must now confront the reality that the window to prevent this future has likely already closed, as the components required to build these machines are too ubiquitous to regulate. Unlike nuclear weapons, which require rare isotopes and massive centrifuges, a Slaughterbot is built from the same components found in your smartphone and your child's gaming console. You cannot ban high-speed processors, optical sensors, or open source code without dismantling the modern global economy, which means the barrier to entry is effectively zero. Any rogue state, non-state actor, or motivated individual can assemble a swarm in a garage, rendering international treaties and arms control agreements functionally useless. We're trying to stop a tidal wave with a chain-link fence, ignoring the fact that the physics of efficiency will always find a way to manifest on the battlefield. In the cold calculus of evolution, the human soldier is becoming an obsolete inefficiency, a heavy, slow, and expensive relic that cannot compete with the speed of silicon. We require 18 years to grow, we need sleep and food, we are prone to panic, and we hesitate to take life. The machine suffers from none of these biological defects. It is faster, cheaper, more obedient, and relentlessly lethal, representing the next step in the industrialization of violence. Just as the horse was replaced by the tank and the arrow by the bullet, the biological warrior is being replaced by the autonomous circuit, not because it is moral, but because it works. We are witnessing the final days of human warfare, not because peace is arriving, but because we have finally built a predator that is too perfect to need us. The wars of the future will not end with a peace treaty signed by generals, but with a silence that falls over the cities, broken only by the faint, high-pitched whine of the cleanup crew. The streets will be empty of people, the cafes will be abandoned, and the playgrounds will be still, yet the traffic lights will continue to cycle and the automated sprinklers will continue to water the grass. High above, the remnants of the swarm will patrol the skyline, scanning the empty avenues for any remaining heat signatures, waiting for the last few survivors to make the mistake of showing their faces. We have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing, sharpening our sticks into spears and our spears into missiles, only to arrive at the inevitable conclusion of our ingenuity. We have built a weapon that does not need a master, and in the quiet, efficient future that is coming, we are no longer the hunters. We are the biomass waiting to be cleared.